Good afternoon, anti-novelists. I am back for this episode of Zettelkasten for fiction writers, where imagination finds order. So let's just jump right into it. Let's continue talking about going from the zero draft to sketching out your characters. So I went ahead and I put a little piece of tape. I don't think you can see that, but I taped these two cards together because we're building our story in this direction and we're also building our story in this direction. And who knows, we may abstract something out here for backstory, or I don't know, because we're making it up as we go. So looking at this, you may recall from the last video that I added a 0 because we needed to introduce the main character's mom. And we also needed to backtrack from this confrontation and introduce her boss. And then in kind of the first major plot point beat of the story, we're meeting the mentor, the sidekick, and the first antagonist that is going to push our character up to this number 3 plot point. So let's just break this down. So the characters that I have already introduced, the characters that need exploration are, we have the mom. So come on, Waterman. So I'm just going to make myself a little mom card, right? Nothing fancy going on there. And then we've got the boss. You guessed it. So we're going to make a boss card. We've got a mentor. We've got a sidekick. And we've got an antagonist. And I'm going to call this antagonist number 1 because we don't know. There might end up being more than one. And then last but not least, I have my, I'm going to say female main character. Okay, so see what I've done there. I have simply gone through my little pretend made up plot story just as we plotted it out in our story modeling exercise. And I've just created one card for each of these people that I need in order to move this story along. So this is where it becomes important to determine, are you a plot-driven writer or are you a character-driven writer? Or do you kind of develop those two things alongside one another and weave them together? There is no right answer. Sometimes you will sway back and forth between them, but the important thing is you need a way to start getting the words on the page, to start getting this story developed. So I'm just going to say, for the sake of argument, that you are a character-driven writer, or maybe you already know something about your characters. So that, my friends, is where you begin your character cards. You're simply going to start by lining out those basic character details. This doesn't have to be anything high level or fancy. This is just giving yourself some of that character framework that you can start hanging details on. So for this example, maybe you're going to flesh out the basic details from the chapter on character development. So you're going to give that main female a name. Oh, my pen doesn't want to work. Name. You want to know where she lives. So let's just go name and address. Particularly you want city and state. I got to change pens. This is driving me insane. Sorry about that. Okay, so you want city and state. And then let's just call it description. So her name, her address with city and state to give us a little bit of grounding in her environment. And then a description of this main character. What does she look like? Hair color, eye color. Is she tall? How does she dress? Just sketch out that basic description. And then guess what you're going to do? You got it. You're going to go to the next card. The next person that you have a bead on from this little story that you're mapping out, You're going to go and you're going to describe this person, which is her mother. Then you're going to do the boss. See where this is headed, etc. and so forth. So that would be the next exercise if you want to approach character and start fleshing out those details. That would be my advice, is you've come up with this idea for a story. You've loosely mapped out what the beginning of that story could look like. And then you're going to color in what those characters look like who are going to take place in these scenes. Now, ideally, what's going to happen is as you have fleshed out those people, that's going to start giving you ideas about what these scenes look like and how you're going to push those characters through. So if you have to meet the mom first and then you have to meet the boss, now that you've done those character cards and you kind of know what they look like, you know what city they're all working together in, etc. and so forth, you're going to think, okay, in this number 1, this plot beat 1, I introduced the mentor, the sidekick, and the antagonist. Well, how am I going to get that done? Well, maybe this, my friends, is where, and I'm just going to use red so it's contrasty to what we're already doing. Maybe this is where you're going to abstract out of here and say, okay, how am I going to get these characters together so that I can introduce them? Well, the easiest thing to do is you're going to decide, okay, they all work together. So I'm going to introduce these 3 characters. Maybe they are the first ones to show up for an important meeting. They're all in the conference room together. And maybe they're having some kind of a conversation or something. And then my main female character, remember, she gets introduced next. This little meetup that's going on here is what it brings us to introducing that main female character. And maybe it's because she's late to this meeting. So we're going to call this a work meeting. And we're going to say, what should we name our main female character? Let's name her, I don't know. I'm fresh out of character names right now. Let's name her Jen. So Jen is late to this meeting, and that is what gets us to this story point right here, this number 2 point. So now, because you know a little something about your characters after fleshing out your character cards, and you know a little something about what you think this story might start to look like because you've kind of plotted it out using your story map, now you can write this scene where everyone shows up for the meeting. There's some things going on, some scenes, some what have you, chitter chatter conversation, and then Jen shows up. And maybe that then becomes your first plot point. Maybe something happens as a result of her being late. Maybe someone reacts or says something or whatever. It's your story. You're writing it. I'm not. Whatever happens. And that then catapults her. I'm going to switch to orange because we're using orange for our antagonist. That is what catapults her into this confrontation with her antagonist, which is your story beat number 2, into story beat number 3, which is where the actual conflict is. Okay, so see how I did that? It doesn't have to be super complex or complicated. It's just lining out visually in an actual story map what this piece of the story could look like. And if you are visual and you think through your stories in a visual way like I do, this will be immensely helpful. So the next thing that I'm going to do is we're going to continue down this road of using a story map to create your 0 draft. When you write out this scene and that leads into the confrontation with the antagonist, this is a 0 draft, right? These are the very first scenes that you're pulling from your research. You're pulling from your character cards. You're just stacking those events up so that you can move that story forward to the next point, which is point 4. Okay? So I'm going to leave you there. Flesh out your character cards. Get those character details onto your Zettelkasten cards. And then the first thing that I will do with you tomorrow is I'm going to walk you through how to take this story map, how to number these character cards, and then potentially how to start putting those into your plot box so this little 0 draft that you've written here gets filed for safekeeping in your plot folders, and you keep on writing your story. So that is it for today. As always, thank you so much. I appreciate each and every one of you, and I will see you tomorrow when we consider working on going from your 0 draft to your work in progress. Keep writing. Good luck. I will see you tomorrow.